across on a CV, it definitely doesn't look like 10 pages that's telling the person reading it every single step of what you have done. It's about making sure that CV can be looked at easily, that your successes are very, very simple to point out, and they'll stand out on the page. One of the biggest things that I always say about hints and tips around CVs is to talk about the achievements rather than the every single step, because an every single step to an achievement is something that you can talk about later on when we go into the applications. But one of the biggest things that I've heard from multiple hiring managers is the answer to one of the biggest questions, which is how long should a CV be? And really, it's 1 to 2 pages. I've had this conversation with you. I've had it with your brother, Matt. Matt, I know, says 1 page, like wants to see 1 page. Many other fintech leaders will say, I want to see those achievements really, really easily. I want to know exactly what somebody's achieved. I want to know exactly what they did that went above and beyond. And I want to see that clearly on the page. So when you have a think about what your CV looks like right now, do you have a summary at the top? Do you have a clear explanation of what you achieved in your last role or within your academics? Do you have a clear outline of what you did to actually go above and beyond? So it's really worth rethinking that. If your CV goes into 3-4 pages at this point, you've got to think about cutting that down and show it to people. Show it to friends, show it to family, say what stands out to you on this page. And if they're not really sure, then you've got to rethink it.
Yeah, that challenge of cutting down, it might just be a minority of people in the room. I mean, you want to be one of those people where you've got tons of good stuff to say. Some people are the opposite, where they really have to bring out many things in terms of the 1 or 2 things that they have. But chopping down is tough, just to add to that point. But look at the experiences you have and just see, am I just repeating myself again and again in these different elements? Once you've kind of made that point and it's quite explicit, you've got evidence to support that skill, that experience, you can look at that job remit you're aspiring to do and think, okay, what else am I missing though from that job requirement that I now need to put in? So that'll help you kind of eliminate in that way. Yeah, my point's more about the narrative of the CV, because often I encounter students from the age of 18 to 21, and I read a CV that they show me, and it might meet the conditions of the aesthetics, the format, and so on. But I read it, and I'm a little bit confused about what this person actually wants to do, because mainly the clients I work with tend to be hedge funds, investment banks, asset managers, people like that. But even within those individual companies, and fintech the same, as was being described, there's many different roles that require different skills. So the easiest one that we could all probably think about is, are you mathematically minded, or do you have skills much more based around interpersonal skills, i.e. leaning towards client-facing, more sales, for example? What I tend to see is people tend to just drop scattergun everything, hoping that something's going to land, and therefore I'm going to have success. But what it looks like to the hiring manager is this person really doesn't understand the role. They don't understand the business or the product. And that shows then that you're not really tailoring and therefore enough to the role to be a credible candidate. So it's really just about, the big question then is, you've got to find the role you want to do, which is the hard one, I know, at your point, because you're like, I don't really know yet. But this is what we're trying to do with the company I work for, is allow you to experience these roles in practice, doing simulations. Another great thing you can do is talk to people. So today, try and talk to different people in different roles. I know there's people from legal, marketing, PR, recruitment. And so talk to them and see which one resonates with you. And then how could you fit? And therefore, how could you be a bit more targeted to accommodate that route? Okay, so applications though. So what does that look like for you?
Just a couple of things on what's just been said there. I've been recording a podcast series for the past 4.5 years called Fintech's DEI Discussions. We're at episode 460, something like that. These are all leaders across the world of fintech talking about their careers, the roles that they have done, how they have grown to C-level many a time, or leadership roles. It's a really accessible way of seeing what cultures are like in different businesses, what people look for in different roles and different specialisms. But it's just such a huge array of different roles across the space. And Matt said right at the beginning, a lot of people perceive that it's just coding in fintech, and reeled off loads of different other positions. There's 460 episodes for you to just pick up, and they're all really short, 10 to 15 minutes. On times 2, that's 7.5 minutes. Really, really accessible. On the applications, though, I would definitely carry on from your point about just being a bit targeted. So many times over the years, I've had people call me up saying, I've done over 100 applications, not one of them has made it through. And then I asked them to talk me through what that application looks like. And you know what? It's the exact same application every single time. The same application to a hedge fund as to a teeny tiny fintech startup. And the application looks exactly the same. The CV looks exactly the same. It's that scattergun approach that was just being mentioned. My advice always is you've got to, now look, I'm a recruiter and I say this, right? Like finding a job is a full-time job, right? And you've got to give it the time. There's no point saying to yourself, right, I'm going to go on LinkedIn and just go click, click, click. Like the minute I see anything which is a fast, easy apply, that is a danger sign for me, because I think every single application needs to be treated as a unique application, needs to be treated with respect. You need to go and do your research on that firm, really have a look at the role that you're applying to, and then tailor the entire application to that. If you're not doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're almost, ticking a box in your head, oh, I've done all those applications, I'm good. When actually, most of the time, it will be scattergun, and you're just throwing stuff at the wall. Super important, take your time, you do your research, you change that summary, be really clear about what you're after, and make sure the evidence backs up what you're applying for.
Yeah, and it's quality versus quantity is always the challenge, which I hear a lot. So the best ways and means of managing that I've seen students do is, of the 100, there's probably some you really want to work for, and some where you're like pitching because backups. If I can't get these ones, then hopefully I can get in here. And so you've got to be a little bit intelligent about how you're doing it. I totally agree. It should be painstakingly gone over. You should understand the company, the products, the roles, their competitors, the industry. All of these things take time. So you can almost break up the 100 and think about, okay, so here are my top targets. I'm going to put all my energies into doing these as best as possible. And then when it comes to some of the others, yes, you've got to only do what's in your capacity. You're going to have to manage some, but make sure that the ones you really want are really done well. And the ways to find out about a company, for example, are podcasts are like the hidden gem. There's every single financial institution out there, big and small, nearly all of them do a podcast. Why do they do a podcast? It's branding, it's marketing for them, whether it's a service or a product. But that's good for you, because I know when I was 18, I would never have had access to a C-suite person in an intimate conversation talking about their career, their mental process, what they do day to day. But you can for every single role, for every single company pretty much now. So find those ones. Don't cram it too late where it's like podcast times 5. You're like, right, yeah, got it, bang, in it goes. You've got to be able to, if you want to become fluent in being able to talk about any industry, you need to be immersed in it. So the easiest thing is little sound bites. You said they were like, some of them 10 minutes.
10 to 15 minutes.
10 to 15 minutes. Yeah. If you did 10 minutes a day, think about if you went to the gym 10 minutes and you were like, right, today's tries, today's biceps, you're working every single piece. It's the same thing, right? If you do 10 minutes, bit by bit by bit, it accumulates, you become fluent, the penny drops, and now you can articulate not just about yourself, but about the industry better. And that commercial awareness gap makes your applications so much more powerful in that way. Okay, networking, I think, is the last one.
And it really connects to everything you've just said there. Like, imagine that you've just listened to a pod or you've just read a blog because you're immersing yourself in this marketplace. When you are at events like this and you're thinking, oh, what am I going to say? How am I going to open something up? Well, something that you've just read, something that you've just heard, something you can say, hey, I listened to this pod, I thought it was interesting. When it comes to networking, people talk to me a lot about how do I make the opener? How do I know who to talk to? What should I say? And of course, we can't hide behind it. People are nervous just to walk over to somebody you don't know and say, "Hey, I'm Nadia. I work in recruitment. How are you?" You know, like it's a tough thing. But one of the things that I wanted to say in this section was practice, practice, practice. So in my podcast series recently, I did a series special on confidence. And this amazing woman taught me about the virtuous circle, which I'm using to everything right now. And the virtuous circle is basically, it's really simple. The more times you practice anything, the better you're going to be. So I completely advise that today, that you think about going over to somebody the first time and saying, "Hey, this is who I am. This is why I'm here today. This is what I'm hoping to gain from it." Okay, see how that went. Was it awkward? Did it all fall apart? Or are we all actually in the same position here, right? Then you say to yourself, "I've learned something from that one. Let's go and do another one. Let's go and do another one." Because one thing about the virtuous circle in confidence is the more times you go around, the more times you evaluate, the more times you learn. And you know what? When you've done something 15 times, you are not going to feel the same way you felt on the first time. And if you just say to yourself, "That's my process of networking," there's so many other things that I know will be said about networking, but I think that sort of fear factor, if we can get through that and actually take that into anything in the workplace, I'm going to feel super different when I'm on my 9th time of doing something compared to my first. And that's how I've taken my speaking engagements. I was nearly sick at the beginning of my first ever speaking engagement back in 2017, like shaking like a leaf. And now I do them all the time. I still feel nervous. I'm not going to change my personality, but it's way easier now at 200 and something than it was at number 1. And if we focus on that with networking, I think we can go really far together.
Yeah, for me, it's about a lot of the time you feel intimidated as a young person because you have this kind of idea in your head. This person's better than me. This person knows more than me. What do I have to offer? And I think the main thing to counteract that is be good at asking questions. You don't have to have all the answers. It's almost lean in to being naive to it all and just ask probing questions. So, for example, I can see, is it Matt? Matt who gave the opening talk, for example, he said he was from New Zealand. So, for example, just understanding about, New Zealand transitioning, what was that like? Not even talking anything about fintech, but just being curious about the individual can just then get the conversation going. And then I think for me, it's about engaging and proactively listening. Because I know when I used to talk to people, I'd be thinking, whilst they're speaking, their lips are moving. And I'm thinking, what's my next question? And I'm not listening to anything that was going on. And then what you actually get better at, because now I do podcasts and stuff like that, is I have a loose plan, but then I listen and I go, tell me a little bit more about that. You see the world in this point of view. That's a little bit different. Could you describe your process to me? Because I'd love to learn. And it's like, people love talking. People love talking about themselves specifically. So if you can get them to do that, that will naturally help you build rapport and make you stand out rather than a transactional kind of conversation in that way. All right. I've been given a nod.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap it up.
So round of applause for Anthony.